Hey everyone. Okay, so this is the last lecture for this semester, for this course. I didn't realize that when I sat down and started recording, or like right before when I was getting a few things set up, I realized it was the last one. So like it's kind of bittersweet. I know I make these types of comments all the time that I miss the interaction with the students, and we don't really get to have that. We get to have a little, when I'm recording, I'm pretending you're there, and when you're watching the lectures, hopefully you feel like I'm interacting with you a little bit. But also, like, I've interacted with quite a few of you, via email on many different subjects. So I can't believe it's already like the end of I know we still technically have 3 weeks left, or something like that. But so it's not technically over, but we're wrapping it up. It feels crazy. This whole year's been crazy, but this semester really flew by. And I'm sure you guys feel the same, that nothing really surprises me anymore. Okay. Before we get started, so hopefully everyone had a great Thanksgiving, and I was just going to tell you a little bit about what I do for Thanksgiving. So why did I blank? I know I mentioned this to you guys a few times that I'm a vegan, and so I'm sure, because in class I used to get these questions like, teacher, what do you do for Thanksgiving? I've been doing this now for probably 10 years. I have vegan Thanksgiving, and when I was living in California with my family, I usually would do my own Thanksgiving on maybe Friday, and I would go my family would have the family thing on Thursday, and then Friday I would have friends and some family over, and but the last few years since I've lived here, I just do vegan Thanksgiving, and sometimes I have family, but usually I don't. It's usually just friends, because a lot of us, moved here for, to work on our PhD or for work, and so a lot of us don't necessarily have family too close, and so doing a Friendsgiving is kind of the norm. And I'm sure as you get older, you'll probably be familiar with this idea, especially I think this is probably true for a lot of you, that you're probably not doing just one Thanksgiving anyway. You probably have maybe a work thing, and a family thing, and then another side of the family thing, and then a friends thing, and then so probably all weekend, right? So I'm sitting down to record this on Saturday, and because I took Wednesday, I was baking all day, most of the day. So I make all my, I told you guys before, I love to bake, I love to cook. So I did a bunch of baking before Thanksgiving, the day before, and I did banana bread. I do everything from scratch. Banana bread, a bunch, chocolate chip cookies. What else did I do? So my boyfriend is allergic to peanut butter, so I did sunflower butter cookies. They were delicious. 2 kinds of cupcakes. One was a cookies and cream. So if you didn't know this, Oreos are vegan. It hasn't been since the early 90s that there's been dairy in Oreos. So all of most of the varieties are vegan. I think the only exceptions are the birthday cake ones, which I only rarely see. Those are not. And around the holidays they have the ones with the fudge dipped ones. Those are not. But all the other ones, if you've had the red velvet or the peanut butter or the mint or whatever, those are all vegan. Just coincidentally. So I used, I made a cookies and cream cupcake, and frosting, did my own frosting. I did a chocolate chip cupcake, and I had all this stuff, and so that's a few things, because I had some friends coming over, and I actually, for the first time in a couple years, I had family coming in from California. My cousin and her kids, and her husband, they all came. So that was great seeing them and having them here, and a few friends, and so, but I did a vegan ham. So, I'm sure, I mentioned this before, with millennials, it's something worldwide, 13% of you are vegan or vegetarian. So I'm assuming most of you are probably familiar with some of these names. Most people are familiar with Tofurky, the brand. So Tofurky has a roast that's okay. I've used it before. It's not bad. It's not my favorite. So if that's the only one you've had, and that's your example of a vegan roast, don't let that be your only example, because it's not the best one in my opinion. It's good, but it's not amazing. However, in the last few years there's been so many more options. So Tofurky does a ham, which I've seen only the last like maybe 2 years, and I did that one this year, and it's like really good. It's very hammy. And Gardein, which is another brand, there's a few other brands have this, but I use the Gardein one. It's my favorite. They have like a holiday roast, and it's delicious. So I did those, and then I did like the standards, you know, like stuffing, mashed potatoes, and gravy. I did like a macaroni salad. All my friends, you know, and family, they brought, you know, we had like, you know, veggies and hummus and you know, bread and dips and I feel like there was so much more food. There was a lot of food, you know, like of course for everyone, you know, just how it is on Thanksgiving. So anyway, the point of like my rant right then was that I had an amazing Thanksgiving with friends and family. I hope you did as well. And then I think the camera's catching it. Like my view when I'm filming is always a little different than the view at the end when I'm like actually watching like what you guys can actually see. And I'm pretty sure you can see my Christmas tree. I put the Christmas tree up already. Like I put it up the next day. I love like I mean I know it's who doesn't, you know, love. Well a lot of people don't like Christmas, but it's not like it's uncommon to say like I love Christmas. I love Christmas. I love Christmas. Like many people, I love the it's not even about the gifts, you know. I mean that's fun, of course, but I think like a lot of people, I like giving gifts more than getting them, and I love, you know, finding a cool thing for someone I know they're gonna love. I love decorating. I love the, you know, the food. I love the music and the lights, and I have so many good memories from childhood. I think, of course, like as many things in life that really have influenced me. So like growing up, you know, my grandma and I, we'd get out the big box of ornaments and we'd put up the ornaments on the tree together, and she'd talk about all the ornaments. Some of them were like from like when my parents and like her siblings were younger, so you know it has like, you know, 1965 on it, written on or something. You're like, oh cool. And then, you know, I had ones from when I was younger, and so I have those good memories. And I remember being really young, and my mom and I, we would like maybe the week before Christmas, we would a couple nights we would go out and get like ice cream at like Baskin Robbins or something, and then we'd drive around like the town and look at all the Christmas lights, people's houses and stuff. I don't know, I just have some great memories. I like the hot cocoa, and I don't feel like it's like very cliche, but I love Christmas. I love the holiday. I love the holidays in general, you know, friends and family and all that. So Thanksgiving was amazing. I have so much food in leftovers. I shoved it in my fridge, and I was like trying to organize it. I'm like, I can fit it all. I just had so much. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to eat a lot of leftovers the next couple days, you know, but it'll get eaten. There's a lot of food. And but then I was excited, of course, and then put up everything for Christmas and get all that started. And I have to be careful with like the girls haven't been crazy about it the last couple of years, but when they were younger, any presents I put under the tree, they would like, you know, rip open. It didn't even matter if it was just like a t-shirt or something, they would do that. But they haven't done that the last couple of years. So I have some, I don't know if you can see, I have a few things out. I'm going to see how they do the next couple of days, and then I might just leave them out till Christmas. Like I love, you know, buying, like as you can see, I've already started. I started Christmas shopping at like August. But I love like having the presents out, and then when I get something new, putting it under, and then the pile just gets bigger and bigger, you know. I feel like such a dork right now. I love Christmas. So, and this year, oh my gosh, okay, so I'm already like, I haven't even started the lecture was talking about my life to you guys. But this year, because I've got some medical procedures coming up in a couple weeks that I have to take some time off for, and I have to have, you know, like long story, well, I guess as a side tangent, I know I've shared a lot of my medical stuff with you. So when I had cancer, I had to go through chemotherapy, and then I had to have surgery to remove the cancer. And they didn't get it all the first time, which isn't uncommon. They told me this before. They said it's about 1 in 5 chance. It just happens sometimes. So I already knew there was like a decent chance that I'd have to go back in for a second surgery. And so they got the pathology report back, and they're like, oh, we need to go back in. Luckily, the second one was they just opened the original incision. It was a small thing. They just had to basically remove one little spot. And because the first one was like major, they like took out the large lump, the mass. They took out my lymph nodes on my right arm. They took out my chemo port that was in my chest. And I think probably some of you have even seen my scar like in the videos. That's from my chemo port. Anyway, so the first one was very traumatic, and then 10 days later I had a second one. And then I had radiation after that. Anyway, so there's a lot of healing your body's going through, right? And your immune system's already shit, and you know, it's hard. And so the first few months, or even the first year, they expect you to be, especially because everyone responds differently to everything, you know. They expect you to be healing in many different ways for a while after all of that trauma to your body. And so for the first year, when I still had a lot of swelling in this arm and this, like, the breast and like the rib cage, and basically this whole side like was very swollen, not very swollen, but like moderately swollen, but very, very tender, all the way to like my elbow. And after about a year, it just wasn't getting any better. And so, you know, my doctor, my oncologist was like, well, I'm going to send you in, because the pain was actually starting to get worse. And so she sent me in for an MRI, thinking like maybe like a nerve had been caught in scar tissue or something, but they didn't see anything on the MRI. She said it was normal, which is like good news and bad news. Like, okay, good news, you didn't see anything crazy happening, but well, then like, what's the problem, you know? So anyway, for the last like year, it's been trying to figure out what's going on with my arm. And anyway, I had to get a second consult, blah, 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 and all this stuff. Anyway, so I saw a doctor about 2 months ago, and she's like, this is something called lymphedema. You have like more of a mild case. And so I asked her, we were talking about it. She's like, you know, a lot of times oncologists, like, they know what it is, but if it's not their specialty, if it's presenting in a kind of an odd way, which mine kind of was, she's like, they might not catch it right away. And so anyway, but also I was having a problem with basically like this issue with my nerve too. And so there's a clear problem with that from the surgery. Anyways, surgical complications was the point of the story. And so they had to send me into like this other doctor. And anyway, the point of that story was like 2 days before Christmas, I have to go in for a procedure because basically the plan is they want to do something called lymphatic massaging, and it's this treatment to help with like the swelling and tenderness, which is great because like I'm asymmetrical. And I know we talked about symmetry and asymmetry before, but I'm asymmetrical. Like this arm from like the shoulder to the elbow is clearly bigger than this arm. The breast is clearly bigger. Like everything's swollen. Like I said, like my rib cage, everything's very swollen. Now if I have like a shirt on, you might, if you really stared at my shoulders, you might notice. It's not like super noticeable, but like if I have a tank top on, it's more noticeable. And of course, like when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I'm like, oh gosh. And when I saw the doctor, she's like, yeah, like you're clearly uneven. Like your whole side is swollen. And she's like, you know, not only do you feel like no one wants to look in the mirror and see that, she's like, but obviously there's clearly like a medical problem we can treat. Anyway, so I have to go in on the 23rd for this procedure, because before they can do this lymphatic massage therapy, they have to do a nerve block. And because I can't handle anything touching, like, can't do massage if you can't touch the earth, I'd be screaming this essentially. And so I have to go in for that, and they have to put me under. And I was like, wait, what? For like an injection? But apparently there's a whole procedure around it, and they have to put me under. And so I have to like have someone, you know, drive me there and bring me home. And she said, you know, because of the anesthesia, like expect to be like a day of, you know, rest and, you know, but I already know how I respond to anesthesia because of surgeries I've had, and it's not pretty. So I'm expecting to have a couple days. I'm expecting to be sick on Christmas because my body does not like it. Anyway, so that's, you know, my exciting Christmas. But okay, that was a tangent from the original story. Okay, 15 minutes into this. The tangent from the original story was that I am trying to kind of rearrange my whole like Christmas season, because it's like I wanted to spend time with family in California. I wanted to spend time here with friends and my boyfriend. I wanted to, like, you know, and I'm sure this is how most of you are, like, okay, even if you're not traveling, you're like, I have friends, I have family, I have my, you know, my boyfriend, or maybe you're married and you're like, okay, my husband's family or my wife's family and then my family, and then you're doing something Christmas Eve or Christmas morning or Christmas night, like it's a thing, you know. And so now for me, throwing in like a whole medical procedure on top of that, it's just, you know, been a little hectic. Anyway, I don't even know why I started telling you guys about that, but I love Christmas. It's going to be a little hectic this year. I think it'll all work out. And I'm very excited about it. And I've been on Amazon, like I'm sure most of you are, you know, Black Friday deals. I was like trying to find like stuff for my dogs, like, you know, cool toys for them because they get spoiled, you know. Okay, so maybe we should start the actual lecture. Okay, this is the last time I'm gonna get to talk to you guys about anything, so I have to give you a little bit more info about, you know, me and my life, because, you know, you guys don't already know enough about me. Oh my gosh, okay. Okay, so this is the last one, and this PowerPoint's not that long. The PowerPoint itself, like you'll notice this when you look at this one compared to the other ones, it's not as much. There's not as much detail in this one as the other ones. That's because it's the end of the semester. I wanted to kind of do a quick rundown of some important topics for this last one. You know, not throw in something crazy at the very end, you know, because we had the sex, gender, and sexuality 3 parts, which was like very complex and a lot of stuff going on that one. So this one's a little like relax a little bit, talk about some stuff we all kind of know, and then that'll wrap up the semester. Okay, so we're on slide 1, this is the title page, so religion and supernatural beliefs, and go to slide 2. So what is, like I said, a lot of the stuff you already know, even if you didn't know maybe like the textbook definition or the definition from Wikipedia or whatever, like you are familiar with a lot of this stuff. So what is religion? So here we have, you know, this definition. So a set of beliefs in supernatural forces that function to provide meaning, peace of mind, and a sense of control over unexplainable phenomena. So we talked a little, and I think I touched on this in the PowerPoint too. We talked about, you know, looking at other species. Briefly, you know, I mentioned to you guys like Neanderthals and Neanderthal religion. So we know that, at least in a simplistic form, if we're going to create like say there's like a simplistic versus complex form, that we know at least that it's not just Homo sapiens that have had some form of religion, that we know at least Neanderthals had some form of religion based on like the archaeological evidence. And, you know, maybe even other species, you know, maybe Homo erectus, like we don't know, no evidence doesn't mean it's didn't happen. So, but we know at least there's one other species that has some form of religion based on the evidence. Okay, so then I have some bullet points here. So obviously religion also functions to help with things and has like, you know, ideals and processes and rituals built around other things like death. And I think we talked about that in this class, like death and death and like funerals and the whole ritual behind that. Also imagine a time, you know, don't even think like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, but think like, you know, 50,000 years ago. How would you explain you as a human? How would you explain, or you as a Neanderthal, how would you explain, you know, a tornado? You know, how would you explain, like, you think of those big things that we understand, like, oh, that's the weather, that's this, you know, process, that's, you know, sometimes just shit happens, or you know, we understand sickness and illness. We're like, oh, you know, a virus or, you know, cancer. Like we understand, like maybe not in great detail, but we living in the world in 2020, especially in the United States, we understand a lot of these things, like based on the scientific research, like, oh, that's just that's that. We don't really attribute some kind of supernatural force to it, although clearly we know that other populations do that. And we could say, keeping in mind those ideas of like ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, basically looking at it in terms of like we understand it, you know, in this one idea or this one perspective, but other populations might understand it in a different way. It doesn't make it better or worse, right or wrong. It's just a different way of looking at it. So I think you guys can all appreciate that. Even, you know, you might be very scientifically minded, but still be a religious person and think, well, you know, science can explain this aspect of, you know, whatever we're looking at. And, but religion kind of gives me a slightly different perspective on how to deal with it. So, like, there are, you know, there can be a marriage of those two things. It doesn't have to be, like, one or the other. I hear this a lot from my students, or this question, you know, do you, as a scientist, or do you have to, you know, not be religious? And it's like, well, it's not like a requirement, you know. I would say probably more so than not, most of the scientists I know, like my colleagues, are agnostic or atheist. And that's like, you know, it's like moderately common, but like I do know some very, very religious people who are absolutely scientists. So there doesn't have to be, you don't have to choose, you know. I think it's just about the individual and what balance you find with it or not. Like it's really up to you. Okay. I was like, this is gonna be a short PowerPoint. I'm at 20 minutes already. Okay. So let's just move on. Slide 3. So religion involves 2 important aspects: what people believe and then what they do. So when we think about like religion or some kind of supernatural belief, typically we think of it in these 2 general categories. Those are like the belief system of that particular religion, and or like the behaviors, like the rituals and things you might do in that religion. So here I have an example of prayer. So prayer is like a behavior. You might have, something like communion or baptism. That's like a ritual that you do within that religion. That's like an action, a behavior, versus like the beliefs might be, there's one God, or there are three, or God is this animal spirit, or God is, whatever or there's no God, it's, nature, like whatever the particular belief is. So beliefs versus behaviors. Okay, slide 4. So 2 main dimensions to religion: transcendental and practical. And I have some bullet points for these. So looking at things like these larger ideas, like the meaning of life, where do you go when you die, like if you go somewhere, where is it, what happens there, what are the belief system in terms of like creation, of all life, or of humans. Usually most religions have that kind of built in, either as like a true, like they feel like it's like an accurate story, or they feel like it's more like a metaphor, depending on the religion. And then of course the practical. So like typically we say there's a connection between religion or supernatural beliefs and like your personal health, or resources that you might need, or protecting yourself. Like there's a practical use for like praying, maybe wishing for the health of you and your loved ones, things like that. So there are those larger like existential questions we ask ourselves. And then there's the more like everyday practical part of religion too. So different ways of looking at it. Okay, so different types of religion. Here we have a list right here. So animism, polytheism, monotheism. And I have a link to a YouTube, I think this is the one that's like the TED Talk. It's like, I don't know, it's like, I try not to make any of these longer than 10 minutes. Like when I post a clip for you guys, I try to make sure they're short so you watch them. I don't recall offhand. I feel it's probably less than 10 minutes. So yeah, I think this is the one talking about like the major world religion. So it's, it's quick, it's interesting. Go ahead and watch that. Probably not a lot of it's like super new to you. Okay, so slide 6. So a little bit more about animism. So this is basically this idea that there is something in us, and often attributed, as you probably have heard, to like all animals or even plants, sometimes depending on the religion, but more specifically to humans, that we as like the human animal, that there is something in us that many religions would call like a soul, that there's something separate from the body that is like our supernatural being. So like many religions have this idea in some form and might extend it beyond humans or might not, depending on the religion. So you guys are probably familiar with that. And then I have, like I'm pointing like you can see me. So then I have some pictures of, I did it again, pictures of the Neanderthal burials. So just as a reminder, like I mentioned, that we know that early humans and Neanderthals clearly had certain forms of, from what we can tell from the evidence at least, that there is something going on in some supernatural belief to some extent because why else would you bury your dead, bury them in a specific position, decorate the grave? At a minimum, it probably signifies that they understand death and its finality, at a bare minimum, and it might even imply, based on, well, depending on also like which group we're looking at, what beliefs they might have surrounding if that person goes somewhere or doesn't, or, so there's something going on. They're very interesting. Okay, so slide 7. So polytheism, kind of in the name, and most of you are probably familiar with this. So there are religions where there's a belief like in many gods versus like one. So quite a few religions, especially like historically, had this belief. There are still some today, obviously, where it's not just like one deity, but like many. And then, of course, slide 8, monotheism, which is, I'm assuming for the majority of you, based on like where we live, this is probably what you're more familiar with, are religions that are monotheistic. So it's a religion where there's a belief in only one God. So we're going to have some examples of that. And so, like, I'll tell you a little bit about me and what I found in the few like the 7 or 8 years I've been teaching, is that many of my students, this is like, they have similar stories. Like I was raised in a very religious home. Well, I'll say like moderately religious. And like I grew up going to church. I have very fond memories of growing to church. Of going to church. Some of my earliest memories are being in church, like Sunday school and my friends, And I remember my pastor, we had like probably my whole childhood was like this one pastor. And I remember like his daughter, she and I were really close friends. But I remember a lot of the positive stuff about it, like, you know, the songs and singing as a kid, and also like even as like you know, like an older child, and then like into my teenage years. Those are all positive things. The sense of community, things like potluck, you know, bringing all the food and everyone eating, and like that sense of like family and community, and feeling like, you know, we are doing something good in the world, volunteering sometimes. So like the good aspects, I would say, the good aspects of religion, whether it's, you know, Christianity or any religion, there are absolutely going to be positive things about religion. And I mean, this is probably the case for many people who maybe were really religious in childhood and then, like myself, are not into adulthood. That I don't think it's all bad. Clearly, I don't. And I think that there are some bad things, you know. That's my opinion on that. But I think there are like so many good things as well. Like I said, I do miss that kind of like that sense of community and family. I think that's always a great thing, especially when you're young as a child. I think that's really good to have that in your life, you know. So some good things. What was I? There was another point I was going to make. I think that was just it. That like for many of you, like many of you may be religious, many of you may not be. Maybe for those who are not, you were maybe raised religious and now you're not. Maybe for some of you who are religious, you weren't raised religious, and now you are, or like a combination of any of those things. You know, we all have our own kind of journey in that. And obviously, I'm assuming with like 30 something of you, they're probably represented in my class, your class is probably more than one religion, which is always really interesting. Especially like if we were in class, we'd be able to talk about the different religious experiences and some of the really interesting similarities, but also of course the differences too. There's always going to be similarities, you know, even when you think like, oh, those religions can't have anything in common. You're like, oh, this is weird. There's like underlying similarities to our religions. Like, who would have known? Okay. So moving on, slide 9. Looking at things like magic and religion. So the name of the PowerPoint is, sorry, my lips are so dry. I keep noticing them in the video. You probably notice they're so chapped. Okay. I feel like I'm still recovering from whatever I was sick with. Like, it's still not gone all the way. Religion and supernatural beliefs. So those two things are the same thing. I think sometimes, depending on what religion you're in, especially if you're raised in a religion, coming at it from that ethnocentric view, you think, well, my religion's normal, but everyone else's religion's really weird. Like, you know, they're all normal, they're all weird. That's, you know, okay. But you have to keep in mind that for most religions, even probably yours, there is some aspect of it that has like a magical component to it. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at with this slide right here, that there are often rituals you might do to create or produce like a certain outcome that's not based on like the scientific method. You know what I mean? Like okay, here's an example. So when I was going in for my surgeries, a couple years ago, I was thinking about, like personally, okay, I've got a really like top doctor. She's like top in her field. My oncologist is great too. Like I, of course, like researched them just a little bit because I found out who they were beforehand. They came recommended, obviously referred from my oncologist, who I had been with for a year and who I loved and who was just an amazing physician. So I trusted her in that. But I'm worried about like those, like what school did they go to? You know, did they get good grades? You know, like, you know, what are the outcomes of most of their surgeries? Because that's the stuff I'm worried about, you know. And then also looking up, you know, statistics on, you know, the likelihood of, you know, not waking up, you know, like I want to see the math on it, you know. But I had people in my family who would say things like, I'm going to pray for you. And being not a religious person, I trying to have that balance as a person, like as an adult, as a mature civil adult, like, okay, I don't really find that personally helpful. But then also feeling like I appreciate that you think it's helpful and that you are willing to let me know that you are doing that for me. So like, that's a nice sentiment, you know, if that whole idea makes sense to you guys, which I think it does. But there's this sense of, and that's just like a really simple example of like that you can pray to your deity and that they will magically, fix something, or even other things built into religion, like for example, like communion. That now this isn't probably true for every sect of Christianity, but for many of them, they believe that when they are eating like the cracker or the wafer during communion, that it is literally turning into a piece of the body of their God. So, like I said, for many in Christianity, they may not believe it to be literal, but many of them do literally believe that's what happened. So there's a sense of like magic in the religion, and this is true for every religion. There's going to be some ritual or some behavior that has like a magical component to it. But also think about our everyday things. So what are some of these like superstitious ideas we have? So I have this picture here, like knock on wood. So like we say that, and maybe even you do it. You're like, oh, is that wood? Okay. Now I think that's just like a cultural thing. We probably don't really think something bad's gonna happen, but maybe you do. Okay, this is a really good extra credit. Okay, this is such good extra credit. What are some superstitious things that you do? So I know some people like, they have to wear like their lucky shirt on game day, or even the everyday, like the more like culturally like widespread things like knock on wood. Like give me like up to 3, and I'll give you like 3 points or up to 3. So whether it's something you do personally or one of the ones you're aware of, like knock on wood. What's another one? What's not the only one I'm thinking of right now? I don't know if you guys do this anymore, but when I was younger, if you said something at the same time with someone else, you'd be like, jinx, so little things like that. So give me like 3 examples. I'll give you up to 3 points extra credit for that. But like we don't think about how every day we do things like that. Or you might have a special like piece of jewelry you wear, you think is lucky. And I see like when the rare times I'm at the casino, you'll see people with like, I've seen this, and I'm assuming a lot of this, but I think it's probably true that people will have like a talisman with them of some sort, like their favorite or their special or their lucky guitar pick or key ring or crystal or like something. So a lot of people do this, and people continue to do it. So there must be some benefit in some way to doing it, whether it's just the feeling of peace of mind that you get. Maybe it's worked in the past, and so you do it again. Like, okay, so this is, like I said, extra credit up to 3. I'll give you 3 points for that. So that'd be really interesting to see what you guys write to me on that one. Okay, slide 10. So religious organization. Let's skim this part. We got shamanistic, communal, ecclesiastical, and I think I have a slide for each of these. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to ask this on the exam, but just, very quickly, here we have shamanistic on slide 11. So we have like whether it's like a shaman or like a medicine woman or a medicine man, that often they're like more like part-time religious specialists. Sometimes they can be full-time depending on the population, and that there's often like this very like personal one-on-one, the spiritual connection that individual often has with like ancestors or like a spirit world. That stuff's super interesting to me. Slide 12, communal. So the religion is a little different. We have things like rites of passage. So also, as we're kind of going through this, think about the examples, similarities and or differences with the book, the ethnography that we read, The Headman Was a Woman. And then go to slide 13, ecclesiastical. So this is when there's like more of a complex system. It's like there's like full-time people invested as like leaders in that particular religion. And there's some examples here. We have like, reverend, priest, rabbi. So you guys are familiar with those, imam. Okay, slide 14. Very interesting topic. New or newer religious movements. So when we think about like religion, oftentimes those like world religions we think of, like the ones that have been around for a long time, like Christianity, Islam. Why am I blanking? Judaism. Of course, I'm thinking of like the same family of religions. I'm blanking. We can all think of ones like, anyway, the point was we think of ones that are older, hundreds or thousands of years. There are some newer movements, and this is, slide 14, sorry. So Mormonism, so an offshoot of Christianity, but only around for not that long, not like thousands and thousands of years. So this is interesting, like a kind of an interesting new interpretation of Christianity with its own kind of movement. So that's newer. And especially in this area, like I was saying earlier with colleagues, like I have a colleague who's Mormon. Actually, I have more than one colleague who's Mormon. So it's very interesting to see, for me as like an anthropologist, to see their take on being a scientist, being a religious person, how they balance those two things. Very interesting, and they do it well, And but people, every individual will do it slightly differently, so that's interesting too. Wicca. So you guys are probably familiar with this. So this is obviously based on something that's much older. But we see kind of like this more ancient idea of like paganism or witchcraft being kind of evolving into something a little more modern in some ways and not in some ways. And I feel like this is very beautiful to me. What I've learned a little bit about in terms of Wicca, the closeness to nature. I think that's a really interesting aspect. The aspects of it being more about like feminine power and forces, I think is also very interesting. Of course, like I love that part. And then Scientology, so much more recent, so less than 100 years on that one. In fact, so I have here on the slide, you'll see there are two links to YouTube videos. One is on Scientology, from Scientology itself. It's like a quick video. And if you go to that link, there will be other links that you can see, or other videos. Like if you were curious, like what does Scientology say about what Scientology is, you can go on that link. And the other one is about, was like a National Geographic, it's like a short, it's like 10 minutes long, on like this new movement of Wicca, like in Europe. But that's a little older video. There are a million videos I'm sure you could watch. And in fact, like when I made this PowerPoint a couple years ago, I'm sure even now there are so many more videos, and I'm sure many of you are probably either, you might even practice one of these or very familiar with it. So, I did want to point out though that for Scientology though, and most of you are probably aware of this, there was a lot of controversy around Scientology, and some people might say it's warranted, some might say it's not. That's up for you, like, to decide on that, like if you were at all interested. I will say, however, that I recently was watching this TV show called Scientology in the Aftermath with Leah Remini, and you probably are familiar with, well, maybe you are familiar with it. I think it's on Netflix now, but it was on like A&E, I think, or yeah. It's her experience. So she spent her whole life in Scientology, and she has been out of Scientology for, I think, since like 2013. And so the show is about kind of exposing this religion for what she feels are like these really horrible, dangerous, oppressive practices that they do. So to kind of see another perspective. For any of the topics we're talking about in this class, it's great to see like the different perspectives on that. So interesting. But I'm sure if you talk to a Scientologist, they would say so many great aspects to our religion. Let me tell you about it. So, it's probably true for every religion. You're going to find people who find it really useful, helpful, so beneficial to their life, and other people who don't. Okay, so slide 15, some other functions of religion, no surprise. Emotional coping, so obviously for, it's definitely, I think, for many people, that source of peace or mental health and stability that they can rely on, their church family, or the sense that they can pray to someone who will help. Even if they can't fix all the problems in their life, they can at least give them a little more clarity and peace about it. Of course, that's a positive thing, Group solidarity, obviously I talked about that one already. Social control. So this one's very interesting. So think about how often religion, in many different forms, is used as a way of social control. So do I have examples? No, I don't. Okay. So think of that in terms of like maybe large scale things, like maybe whether it's in our legal system or in another country's legal system, how that might play a role, whether the religion of that population plays a role in legality, like those larger cultural, social things. But also like everyday life, how often do we see it controlling, and not necessarily in a bad way, but maybe influence is a better word. How often do we see it influencing us in things we do? And how often do we tie our sense of like individual or personal or even like social morality to a particular religion. And of course we know, like, well, I shouldn't say of course because many people probably don't realize this, but of course you don't have to be religious to be a moral person. And like if you were at all curious, you can look up statistics on, you know, people who commit crimes and what religion they are or aren't, and you can kind of make that decision up for yourself. But obviously, in a general sense, we all know that whether you are a member of this religion or this religion or this religion or not, you can still have a sense of morality, and it's not necessarily tied to any particular religion. So if that makes sense to you. Okay, not to go on a tangent with that one. Okay, so slide 16. So what is a symbolism? So if I just had those 3 symbols up, you probably would be able to, at least for 2 of them, I'm assuming, but hopefully all 3, you would recognize that should mean something to you. You should be able to say, like, that's a symbol of that religion. And then maybe, based on your personal experience, you can then, like, extrapolate in your mind all these different interesting parts of that religion that are going to come to your mind. So think about when we talked about this before with those symbols you see, like when you see the Olympics symbol, your brain right away recognizes that's the symbol for the Olympics, but right away in your mind, you're probably thinking of like watching it with your family, watching it when you were a kid, what's your favorite sport, is summer versus winter. Like you have all these other thought processes that are happening because of that one symbol. So this is the same for these religious symbols. Okay, slide 17. Religious rites and rituals, there are so many. I listed a handful you can see on this PowerPoint that you are probably familiar with. I'm assuming most of them. So like most of you are probably familiar with, you know, like communion, baptism, Ramadan. I listed in here at the bottom, like weddings even. We talked about this before about when we talked about family and marriage. Weddings, not always, but often have a connection with religion. I think traditionally for many people, there's some part of it that is you're getting married in like your church or your synagogue or being married by your religious leader in some way. So there's often a tie between those 2 things. And let's see, slide 18. And then I just have some pictures here at the end for you showing communion. Let's see what else, some baptism. What else is here? A couple other things, some marriage stuff. Okay, that's pretty much it. Like I said, this one was like not too complicated. Trust me, there's a lot more, obviously. You guys know we could talk about religion for like, I could have made parts 1 and 2 on this, but keeping it simple, very surface level, wrapping up the semester for you guys. Hopefully you take away that interesting, like, symbolic stuff that I touched on. Okay, so we're at 42 minutes. And this, like I said, it's the last one of the semester. I mean, we're not done yet. You still have, what do we have? The final. And I'm grading your ethnography papers. I've gone through about half of them. They're great. You guys did a really good job. Everyone's kind of approaching them a little bit differently. I don't see any major problems with any of them so far, and it looks as if, from like my brief count, that pretty much everyone turned them in. If you are having an issue, there's a few people I talked to already. If I haven't talked to you about it and you maybe needed an extra day or you're really confused about a part of the assignment, like please reach out to me on that. But otherwise, you should see your grades in Canvas in the next few days. And like I guess that's it for this lecture. And I'll probably post another video at the very end of the semester, like a wrap up of the semester with like just talking about finals or something. Obviously it'll be a short video, but not a lecture. But this is the last lecture, and I'll see you guys on the next time I video. I can't even say the next one because this is the last one, but I'll see you the next time. I'll see you the next time. Okay. Oh, don't forget about that extra credit.